Fetal alcohol syndrome is considered one of the most underreported disabilities affecting babies. Across the world, on this day every year, people gather to raise awareness of the syndrome. Prue Walker is the Child Protection Manager for Arnhem Land and has done extensive research in the area. I spoke to her earlier today. Prue Walker, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Louisa.
What are the problems facing a child born with fetal alcohol syndrome?
Okay, well, children with fetal alcohol syndrome have essentially a brain injury from birth that's going to affect all areas of their development, so their learning, their memory and their functioning, and that's going to go with them through their adult life. Children with FAS also can have a growth problem, so children may not put on weight and sometimes fail to thrive in the early years, and they'll have other developmental problems through their life. So it's really a lifelong condition.
That must have a lot of implications in the classroom, in the learning of...
Definitely. Children with FAS really need a tailored program because there'll be some things that they're quite good at, but other things that they won't be able to manage in a classroom. And it's often frustrating for teachers because these children don't learn very well and they don't have good memory skills. So while other children are learning, these kids are not, and yet sometimes they can do things quite well. So it's more frustrating for teachers who don't understand the disability because they're thinking, well, why can they do it one day but the next day they've forgotten how to do it.
How big of a problem is it here in the Northern Territory?
Well, we know that the Northern Territory's got, the highest rate of alcohol consumption really in Australia, and that's been well documented. And fetal alcohol syndrome goes along with alcohol consumption, particularly when it's at risky levels like binge drinking. So it's prevalent in any community where you've got high levels of binge drinking, which we have got here.
The reports say that it goes undiagnosed quite a lot. Why is that?
Well, the studies show that a lot of doctors are not really confident in diagnosing FAS or FASD, which is fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So that's a broader syndrome that encompasses, a wider range of damage through early exposure to alcohol. And we don't have any way to diagnose that in Australia at the moment. There is work being done on diagnostic guidelines, but currently the only person that can diagnose fetal alcohol syndrome is really a paediatrician, and not all children see paediatricians routinely.
Is there need for more research, do you think, in this area?
Definitely, and I think there's some really interesting work being done in Australia. There's studies in the Fitzroy Crossing area looking at prevalence and diagnosis of FASD, and I think in the NT we're really quite interested in what the outcome of those studies is going to be.
I understand that's the first population-based study ever done.
Is.
Can you explain why that's so significant?
It's the first study done in Australia like that. There's lots of studies overseas, but I think we haven't really... Fetal alcohol syndrome has not really been on the radar in Australia to at a level that I think it probably deserves, because it is, it's the leading cause of intellectual disability among children that is preventable. And I think, it's taken a while for people in Australia to really grasp the magnitude of the issue. And so without data, we haven't really been able to address it effectively. But I think now, governments are positioned better to really start looking at this issue and taking more notice.
What impact does that have, not having it so much in the spotlight?
Well, I think, for example, in my experience in the child protection system, children with FAS are more likely to come into care, both because they've got developmental issues, but also their parents may be using alcohol to a level that puts the child at risk. So when those children come into care, some of them have a diagnosis, but others don't, and then it's really up to the workers, the caseworkers, to decide how do we best case manage those children. What do they need? So we've really had to look to overseas expertise to get a sense of what is best practice working with children with FAS and FASD.
Prue Walker, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks, Louisa.